Speaker, I don't even know where to start in response to all of that. Let me first of all inform members about what the legislative history of the bill that we want to bring to the floor is, because if you listen to the gentleman, you would think that it just came out of nowhere. On July 15th, 2022, Chairman Grijalva introduced H.R. 8393, the Puerto Rico Status Act, with original co-sponsors Chairwoman Velasquez, Resident Commissioner Jennifer Gonzalez Colon. By the way, I'll remind you again, she's a Republican. She's a Republican delegate from Puerto Rico, and Representative Darren Soto of Florida. The Natural Resources Committee held a hearing on April 14th, 2021, entitled Insular Affairs Legislative Hearing on Puerto Rico Political Status, and a hearing on June 16th, 2021, entitled Office of Insular Affairs Legislative Hearing. On July 20th, 2022, the full committee met and held a markup of the bill and favorably reported it, with an amendment in the nature of a substitute by a vote of 25 to 20, with Resident Commissioner Gonzalez Colon joining the majority. So the idea that somehow nobody has been talking about this, kind of doesn't reflect what the legislative history is. I also want to ask unanimous consent to insert into the record an AP article from June 2022 entitled Puerto Ricans Speak Out on U.S. Territory's Political Status.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, it's clear something needs to change. Puerto Ricans don't want to continue under the island's territorial status for many reasons, namely because while the status recognizes its people as U.S. citizens, it doesn't allow them to vote in presidential elections, denies them certain crucial federal benefits, and limits their congressional representatives' voting power. The Puerto Rico Status Act is a good solution that will allow Puerto Ricans to decide for themselves what the next step should be. We should give them that opportunity. The gentleman talked about process in terms of how this House is being operated. Let me remind the gentleman, let me remind all my colleagues that when the last time the Republicans were in charge of the House, the Senate, and the White House, they controlled everything. I mean, everything. Last time they did that, you know what they did? They shut the government down and walked away. That's not responsible governing. That was unconscionable. And leading up to that government shutdown, in the Rules Committee, we had an emergency meeting on what? Cheese. I mean, don't even ask me to explain that, but that's what they did. They had an emergency meeting in the Rules Committee on cheese. I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record a Huffington Post article entitled, House Republicans Called Emergency Meeting on Cheese as Shutdown Approached.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, my Republican colleagues seem to be confused about why we are moving quickly here. Well, let me explain it simply. In the last few hours that they were in charge, as I said, they called an emergency meeting on cheese. Don't get me wrong, Madam Speaker, I love cheese just as much as everybody else in this chamber does. But I think the systematic disenfranchisement of millions of American citizens is a little bit more important than cheese. Maybe my Republican colleagues disagree. I also point out, since that this is not the last day of this Congress, we will be here to complete our business on an omnibus appropriations bill. But I want the American people to understand how my Republican friends have acted in these last few days. So we're still trying to work out the details of this government spending bill. We're working with Republicans and trying to come up with some sort of an accommodation. We need a little bit more time. So what we voted on yesterday was a continuing resolution to keep the government running a few more days so we don't have a shutdown, to work out the details. It's not the final package. Lots of stuff still remains to be figured out. But what we said is we need to pass a short-term continuing resolution for a few days so that we can work out those details and so we don't shut the government down and cause all kinds of chaos, because we know what government shutdowns do. And I think it's really interesting for people to understand that 201 Republicans voted to shut the government down. If they succeeded, the government would be shut down tomorrow. They voted to shut the government down. Who does that? I mean, what are they thinking? You know, all because there's a small group of people here in the House, you know, that are, whose allegiance to Trump and the hardline right-wing fringe of the Republican Party say they don't want to have any kind of deal. They don't want to govern. They would rather shut the government down, costing the economy billions and billions of dollars, causing all kinds of uncertainty, and hurting the American people. They did that before. If they had their way, the government would be shut down tomorrow. I mean, talk about irresponsible. And so I also have to point out that every Democrat who voted yesterday, 215 Democrats voted to keep the government running. So apparently, members of the Republican Party do not think they are responsible for governing. They vote no on everything, and they criticize us for the way we do the job that they won't do. We heard the gentleman criticize President Biden for, for dealing with the drug crisis at the border, for actually seizing fentanyl. He's getting criticized because we're seizing it at the border. Really? Look, this is simple. The legislation that this rule will bring to the floor gives the people of Puerto Rico a choice, one that they deserve to determine their status. It is past time we provide them this opportunity to decide for themselves what kind of relationship they want with the United States moving forward. And so that is what this bill, that is what this rule will do, bring that bill to the floor. But before I close, I would just, again, urge my Republican friends, stand up to the Freedom Caucus. Stand up to the hardline right wing in your conference who says no to everything. Put the American people first. Put people over politics. And that's what this, that is something that I think is not an unreasonable request. The idea that over 200 of my friends voted to shut the government down yesterday, give me a break. So we're going to do our work. We're going to pass this bill today. We're going to get to an agreement on an omnibus bill that will help the American people. That'll be next week. And we're going to do our job because we believe our job is to govern. That's the responsible thing to do, not shut the government down. And with that, I urge a yes vote on the rule on the previous question. I yield back the balance of my time and I move the previous question on the resolution.
Without objection, the